So what did you think of the movie?
Okay, so this is the second time we've watched Uncut Gems. The first time that I saw it, I was blown away. I'm equally impressed this time. The first thing that both of us felt when looking at, watching this movie both times was the intensity of the thing. It was like a roller coaster.
It really is.
But in fact, a roller coaster that's always going down.
Always going down, completely out of control.
Up and down, but really mostly just intense.
Mostly intensely going down. Like you said, I feel that this movie really represented, the chaos of life, the uncertainty in life, and how you really don't have any control over how a lot of people, especially Americans, don't have any real control over what's happening in their life. They're sort of at the mercy of everyone else's, whims and demands.
Yeah.
If you notice that about Adam Sandler's character.
Yeah.
Right?
So he is out of control. Before he even does something, he tells the world what he's going to do, which makes him vulnerable for attack or for, people
taking advantage of him.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, the takeaway from that is, you don't have to share your plans with everyone. Howard's goal in sharing his plans with everyone was, because he owed everybody money. So he's like, okay, I'm going to do this, and then you're going to get paid, and there's going to be a payoff, and I'm going to do this, and so you're going to get paid. And so it was constantly like sharing what was coming around the corner.
Right. And so instead of actually doing the thing, right, to make the money to pay off that other person and keeping it private, he let everybody know that he was doing something. And when you do that, the expectations go up higher, and they get more mad at you when things don't, when you don't come through. Right. And so he was constantly on the defensive in a lot of ways.
And by sharing all this information with his bookies and with various other people in the Diamond District, because that's what he did. For those who haven't seen the movie, he runs a jewelry store in the Diamond District in New York. Right.
So he's in a building where there's other diamond dealers or jewelry dealers, and he has his own line of things. He's been in the business for a long time. You said that it looked very 80s. One of the characters is talking to a customer and saying he's been in the business for years. He was basically supplying, rap artists with bling since, those days, right? And so one of the symbols of that were these characters from a movie. What was that called? Gremlins or something?
Right.
Gremlins. So they were the gremlin characters, but they were jewel encrusted, and they were maybe, maybe the same height as the original character, maybe about 6 inches tall.
Right.
And they had a chain on them so you could wear them around your neck.
Right.
And the eyes would go back and forth. And so this is a symbol of his past glory. Right. His past success.
Right.
But now he's in a place where everything is chaotic because he's been trying to maintain that success since he started. You cannot maintain that kind of trajectory ever. And I think that's a good metaphor for capitalism or the United States.
Right. Or always trying to achieve, past glory, which is, something that when people go through, especially men, when they go through that midlife crisis, they try to, they try to reinvent that, the glory of their teenage years, whether they were a football star or whatever it was, you know what I'm saying? So I feel like we also have the character representing kind of a midlife crisis too, that's going on. To go back to what we were talking about, how he always announces what he's planning to do, to the world at large, gives that world an opportunity to take advantage of him. So suddenly, instead of it being, a 15% pay cut, suddenly it's a 17% pay cut. And they're constantly changing the rules on him.
Right, so.
And based on, his announcement, oh, hey, guess what? I'm going to be able to pay you now because I've got this other deal in the works.
Right.
And so suddenly they have changed their policy,
and the rules.
And the rules, like, it's all like this weird gamification. It opens up with miners in Ethiopia. And actually, it doesn't open up the scene with the miners, like, doing the job. It opens up the scene with chaos. With a miner has been injured. Like, his leg has been shredded. The obvious metaphor for that, which is that you've got these miners that are probably making slave wages. The director, the writer, the people, writing the plot needed to make sure that we understood as the viewer that the miners had no control over the work they did. They didn't own it. They had no investment in it. It was an outside foreign corporation that runs the Ethiopian mine. So who was that? Who?
Believe it or not, it's the Chinese.
It was the Chinese, exactly. Right. Like, they needed to make sure that it was clearly somebody who wasn't of Ethiopian descent running the mine. So they threw in the Chinese corporate entities,
or Asian. So I mean, they could have been Japanese mine owners. They could have been
they were
whatever.
Asian.
They were Asian. Okay. Right. And then you see the miners starting to riot.
Right, because of the injury. And they know that they're not, they probably know that they're not getting paid. And this is sort of like the theme of the whole movie. So you see this rioting and all this chaos, but you see two or three miners kind of break away from the chaos, take advantage of this big distraction to go look into something that caught their eye earlier.
Right.
And pull it from the earth
and sneak it out under the while all this other chaos is going on. So you got this. So they go in, and what they eventually find and extract is what's called an Ethiopian black opal.
Ethiopian black opals are very rare and much more beautiful than Australian opals. But the ironic thing is that they're not as valuable.
Right.
They're cheaper. The plot chooses that particular type of gem, that it's super rare and incredibly fiery and beautiful with lots of depth to it and color, but not as valuable on the market. You
could say, oh, well, that's racism, or that's, this or that.
I think that would be the go-to for the liberals who watch this movie.
Right.
Sure.
But I don't think it's that. I think that's an obvious metaphor, and it's too obvious. When something is incredibly outstanding, people don't know its value. When it's so outstanding, they don't know its value. And I think that we can also point to Howard, the main character, as being the same thing.
Right.
Now, why we looked up why the value of black opals are not as high, and the answer was kind of surprising.
Because they are attempting to thrive in a competitive market.
Okay, that is the metaphor of Howard.
Yeah. He is one of many in the Diamond District.
You've got this opal that's colorful and showy, and Howard, who's also very colorful and showy, and he's also competing. So they're both the same.
Right.
And the other part of the metaphor is that what we're seeing is the uncut opal, but you can see into it from the sides, as the guy in the auctioneer was saying. It has windows,
right,
that you can see into, right? And so you can see the depth of character of the stone. With Howard, it's the same thing. He's also uncut. What we're seeing is this rough,
uncouth,
just like showy, like stupid, insipid
fumbling
kind of kind of dude who's always like trying to placate others, right? And when he's able to shine, when we see him in his element, he actually has those we see those windows as well. Right. Those windows into his depth of character and the colors and the real beauty that's in there.
Right.
And that, I think, ultimately, and we said this, is that it is his talent and his true abilities that make him, what he truly is. And I think that's the case for all of us, but I think that's the case with Howard.
So the only time we saw depth with Howard was when he was explaining the history of the Black Opal. He was explaining to the basketball player, Kevin, or KG as he's referred to, that the reason he was so drawn to the opal was the story. He's like, I was watching TV one day and, I was just flipping around and all of a sudden I see these Ethiopian black Jews mining for this rock, and I was like, what is this? And he became fixated on it, and throughout the movie you hear him say over and over again at various points in the movie, which is about 2 hours and 15 minutes, you hear him say, I spent 17 months working to get this.
Right.
So this is a metaphor for life. Like, you spend your whole life trying to achieve your dream, working towards the thing that will truly make you happy and bring you glory or bring you some kind of satisfaction, whether it's finding the perfect house or, finding the perfect job or even the perfect woman or man to settle down with. You spend all this time and energy going after it. So that when he said that over and over again in the movie, I spent 17 months trying to get this thing into my hands, and what he must have gone through to get it. He said, I spent a lot of time on the phone, which means he probably spent a lot of time like haggling and arguing and setting negotiating and planning. The thing ended up arriving in a fish,
in a cold pack, inside of a fish, because it had to be snuck out of the country.
Exactly.
Right. So it wasn't contraband. It was valuable, but it was the kind of thing, they had to sneak it out from underneath the noses of the corporate entity as well as the state.
Right. So lots of creative negotiating went on in order to get this thing. That's you don't see the creative negotiating because you don't see those 17 months, but clearly they were important to him because he keeps bringing it up.
We were talking about the opening of the movie is in this mine, and these guys dig this thing out, and then the camera goes into the opal. And what's said later in the movie is that if you look into an opal, you can see the universe. Right. And it kind of guides us through this, these flecks and these colors and
it
everything.
Does look like you're looking at the universe.
Yeah, exactly. And then
the solar system.
And then it transitions from the opal into a colonoscopy, and we're inside somebody's colon, which it turns out to be Howard's.
So the first time we ever see Howard, he's basically getting fucked up the ass.
Yeah. And we see him from the inside, and we see his
literally.
Ass end. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so he is being fucked up the ass.
Yeah.
So that gives you, that sort of sets the stage of like where this guy is. He is not a schlub, and yet he's treated like one.
Exactly. And even later on when he has a conversation with his doctor who calls him to tell him, the results of the colonoscopy, the doctor even says, I was able to buy my mansion because of all these colonoscopies. Yeah. Howard is like, what?
Colon cancer has paid for my mansion. Right.
I get to fuck people up the ass and make lots and lots of money as a result.
Right.
That's basically, right there in a nutshell, is the medical industrial complex.
Exactly.
That is absolutely allopathic medicine, Rockefeller medicine, screwing people out of, their money, overcharging insurance companies in order for these institutions and these doctors to be like super wealthy.
The other thing then is that at the beginning, like after the colonoscopy, he's walking back from the doctor's office back to his store, his shop. The music in the background sounds like it would normally be like ambient music, like like quiet electronic music that you would use to calm down or to, just kind of like focus. Right. And yet it's loud.
And it's really grating and irritating on your nerves.
Yeah, because it should, and it's something that should be calming you down, but it's something that actually is doing the opposite because it is so loud. And I think, we were talking about how that was kind of a metaphor for, we try to find things that are outside of us to help us feel better. And yet they don't do that. They do the opposite. And here he is, he's talking to somebody on the phone. He's trying to get back into his office. There's all this disruption. There's all this chaos. And there's this crazy music in the background that's kind of like irritating all of us. Right. And it's amping up the whole tension in that scene, right? It eventually goes away once he gets into the store. And he kind of like, he's in his element. But even in his store, his shop, it's crazy. So there's something else that's going on that he has to leave to go take care of something.
He's going into his apartment and he sees like 2 or 3 women stumbling out of the apartment. He goes into the apartment and he sees his girlfriend like in bed with another girl. And he says this to her a couple of times throughout the movie. He's like, it must be nice to just go into work whenever you want because she's also his employee.
And I think that with her, she is no slouch. And in fact, she's something that is like his, like you said earlier, she's kind of the one that lifts him up. She's the one that really lets him shine.
Right.
For who he is.
Right. And I also think that that's a metaphor too for like, how we all need one person who has our back. And we definitely don't want to be like screwing those people over. We don't want to be alienating them because the entire world is against Howard. Mm-hmm. His wife hates him. His kids hate him.
Mm-hmm. Well, he even has trouble with one of his employees because his employee hates him for the chaos and craziness that goes on in the store.
And then one of his other family members who he owes money to hates him. Nobody really likes him and nobody really respects him, except for his employee / girlfriend.
Kevin, the basketball star, is an extension of Howard's potential or Howard's talent, Howard's, the thing that makes him special. Right. Okay. She is as well. And I even forget her name. The girlfriend's name. Julia, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so Julia is also an extension of that because she is the talent, she is the thing that makes you special that you don't pay attention to, that you don't value.
Right. So, metaphorically speaking, she could be that talent that you have on a guitar or with painting or even just talking to people, and you convince yourself that, you're shy, or you convince yourself that you're not talented, and you just let it kind of sit there dormant, and you don't do anything to feed it or nurture it,
or you deny it
completely.
And by doing that you make yourself miserable. Right. And it's only when you are there with that thing that makes you who you are, makes you better, makes you happy, right?
Makes you feel fulfilled and complete.
Right, because she's like trying to placate him after because he's upset that he walks in and she's in bed still and she hasn't been to the office, and so he says, must be nice to just not go to work. And that's the kind of thing that people will say to you if you have like an artistic talent or something like that you thrive in. Okay, but capitalism does not allow you to be that person or be that thing that you are. Right. Because there's no value that's placed on it from outside. There is no way that capitalism can make money from that easily. That thing is denigrated. When he finds her there in bed, right, that, oh, you're just lazy, right? You just want to make art all day. You don't want to be productive. Well, wait a minute.
Right.
So, but he comes in and she says, well, come on, it's okay. Do you want to cuddle?
Right. So she wants to nurture the part of him that has dreams, and wants to be better than his circumstances. She wants to nurture that part of him and bring it out. And I would even go so far as to say that it's not, just capitalism or the nature of the way of the market, here in the United States, that only puts value on people that work. It's part of the American consciousness. Everybody should work and because it's part of this consciousness now where if you don't work, then you're nothing.
Right.
Like, unless you are a slave to somebody else's bottom line, then you must be nothing.
Right. You have to work just to work, right? I mean, working for work's sake.
So the theme of the movie is for Howard to have someone else recognize the value of the black opal.
Right. Well, I think the name is the symbol, is the theme of the movie. Uncut Gems. The gem is uncut.
Right. It's
obviously.
It looks like a rock.
Yeah.
So to the naked eye, it looks like a rock with a couple of sparkles in it.
Right.
Unless you know what you're looking at.
Right. But Howard is an uncut gem, as we've pointed out.
Right.
His girlfriend Julia is an uncut gem. Now, and the value of the gem is there because somebody places that value on it. Kevin is a polished gem. His value increases because people see what he can do, right?
Because he produces something.
Right.
He puts the ball in the basket. He produces something.
Right, exactly.
Right.
And so he's the polished gem, even though he's a metaphor for Howard's potential or talent or whatever. He's what people pay attention to, right? And so I wouldn't say that he's the uncut gem, but he is that potential that we can become after we are transformed.
So if you look at this transformation, it takes a lot of pressure. The pressure of the earth turns carbon into diamonds. And so if you look at his life and the chaos, the theme, this sort of high octane, like super stressful life that he has, is pressure. Pressure from his wife, his children, his business, his people that have expectations on him, his bookies who need to be paid because he lost the bet, that kind of thing.
Right.
Just constant pressure.
So you've got all that pressure and all that compression, I guess, is the best way to put it,
right.
To bring out that gem inside. But then there's also the brutality of turning an uncut gem into something that people admire. So Kevin is that polished thing. We don't see the years and hard work that he put into becoming who he is, a basketball star, but we are seeing, Howard going through this process, the cutting away, because gems are cut, right?
Right.
So they have to cut away the outside stone in order to show what's inside, and so you see this chipping away at his life in order for him to attain the potential that he has. I guess we can say at this point, it takes being shot and killed. It requires the destruction of him and his old life in that shop to show that, the winnings that, came from that and transferred to Julia what he really is, right? The thing that doesn't have to work so hard to be great, that doesn't require a lot of work and that brings him joy and brings everybody joy. It takes that killing of the other part of himself, the part that nobody respects, in order to get to that place. And you also were saying that you felt like, Kevin's ability and his winning that game was also that extension of his talent.
So if you go to the theme of the movie, the goal of the plot is for Howard to get paid. Howard wants to get paid $1 million for the gem.
Right. Despite
the fact that the auction house only valued it at like $150,000. Despite the fact that there was some bullshit move with Kevin, who at first promised to pay him, $175,000, and then he wouldn't auction on it at the appropriate time. But then he turned around and said, okay, wait a minute, I will buy it off of you. Despite all of these hiccups with getting the true value of the rock itself, which in Howard's mind was $1 million. Despite all that, he ended up getting the $1 million, but in a way that you would not expect. So he knew that he had to tell Kevin, you are the best player like in the whole world.
Right.
And he talked him up. Right. He sat down with him and he said, you're the best player. Just go for broke. Just do it. I know you can do it. Right. Tap into your potential. Kevin himself, when he looked at the gem, when he looked at the rock for the first time, and he knew that he needed it in order to be the best player, he thought the rock had some kind of magical powers, and he wanted to hold on to it so that he could play a good game. That's a classic ball player trope. Ball players, when they're on a winning streak, they will do silly things like not cut their hair, like not shave.
Right.
They carry their favorite talisman around in their pocket, So that's what that represented.
Yeah, but I think that it was even deeper than that.
Oh, it did. It is much deeper, because the first time he looked into it, you saw a flash of Kevin's life.
Right.
His childhood pictures from school, like his family.
Well,
you saw
the whole like going back to Africa.
Exactly.
In the beginning of the world. And like everything, right?
You saw him go to those places, and he saw the fire in the opal, and he saw the universe, and so he was like, I need this in order to play the best game. So it was at that point that Howard recognized that Kevin had the potential. So later on in the movie, when Howard has his past coming after him, literally through the door, wanting to pound him yet again and keep him down, which is the theme throughout the whole movie. The wife hates him, tries to keep him down. The kids don't respect him. The one family member that he owes money to has constantly got these goons after him that are constantly beating him up and throwing him in water fountains and threatening him and all
punching him,
here they come again. Not only was Howard able to convince Kevin to go ahead and pay for the stone. So Kevin shows up at the shop with the money and says, hey man, sorry I didn't do my part at the auction, but I'm willing to make good now. Here's the money. He turns around, takes the money, and he gives it to Julia and says, go turn this into $1 million.
Yeah.
And here's how.
Right.
And she does.
Right.
And it's at that point that you realize that the only way that it could be turned into $1 million is if Kevin did his part. Kevin had to not only win the game, but he had to own the game, because Howard made like the bet of a lifetime on Kevin. And the only way that Kevin could really own the game is if Howard said, you're going to own the game. You have the potential. You're a god on the basketball court. Right. You're going to make this happen.
Right.
So he created his own success. He created that $1 million, which is, again, the running theme of the whole movie.
If Julia and Kevin are his talent and his potential, or whatever it is that we're trying to describe,
right?
Okay,
tapping into that part of himself, right? He
builds up Kevin, and he provides a seed to Julia. So now he is actually recognizing in himself, when he sees his past coming after him, he ignores that. Once he shuts that out and pays attention to the muse, right? He pays attention to, and he builds Kevin up, and he gives something to Julia to allow her to turn something that's valuable, that he has, but to make it even more valuable by giving it that trust. He's trusting in his own talent. He's trusting in his own potential.
Right.
And that's what turns it into something even more valuable. Those two things together,
right.
Julia and Kevin,
right,
are the very things that are inside of him. And once he decides to pay attention to them and really, instead of dicking around and trying to screw them over, just passing them off or just not really paying attention to them, once he pays attention to them and gives them what they need to thrive, they thrive.
Exactly. And so the whole thing with Julia, too, is that she never questions anything. She always does exactly what Howard tells her.
Yeah.
Even when he broke up with her and he was like, leave my apartment. So he has an apartment on the side in the city, and he also has a home in the suburbs with his wife. And he breaks up with her because he assumes that she is sharing her talent with someone else when she actually wasn't. She's very loyal to him.
Right.
And he breaks up with her. She did exactly what he said. Mm-hmm. He said, I want you to empty your stuff out of the apartment and get out of there by tonight. And when he went to check later, she was gone.
So this is somebody who's turning off their talent when he did that, right?
Right.
He's like, I don't need you to be something. I don't need to make art to be a great person. I don't need to make music to be a great person, or I don't need to do whatever it is I'm best at, painting signs, whatever, right? I'm going to go get the corporate gig because the money is there and I'm going to make better money doing that, right?
Right.
Well, that comes with its own problems, and that's what he's dealing with day to day. His former talent, his former success, symbolized through those little characters, those little gremlins.
Right.
Okay, they're still hanging around, by the way, right?
Right.
You notice they're in the case.
There.
They're still there. They're hanging around. They're in the case. Nobody wants them.
They're a reminder of, the past glory of his life.
So instead,
which nobody cares about anymore.
Right, exactly. And he cuts out the thing that is his potential, ignores it. He throws away the muse so that he can have what he thinks of as a sure thing.
Right.
Right. But once he embraces those things, and I'm coming back to what I've said earlier, once he embraces those things, that's where he transcends.
And when he said, here is the money that Kevin gave me to pay for the stone or pay for the uncut gem, I want you to go and make $1 million out of it, she did exactly that.
Right.
Like, she never argued with him, and she never was afraid that she would fail.
Right.
She just followed directions without question. So let's talk about the movie set.
Right. The aesthetics of
the aesthetics of the movie.
The design, yeah.
The set. So his apartment is just awful. It's like a typical bachelor's pad, but not only that, it's like straight out of like the 80s.
Yeah.
It's got like
black furniture
with a
neon
decoration and bad art. I think the movie...
It's set in 2012.
Right. It's actually, yeah. So the plot of the movie is set in 2010, 2012.
Yeah, 2012, because the scene opens in 2010 at the mine.
At the Ethiopian mine, right. So then 2 years later is 2012. And you're thinking that you're watching a movie or that you're watching something out of like New York from like the mid 1980s.
Right.
Like even the way they dress.
Yeah.
But it's not trying to be that. I think what it's trying to tell you is that everything about his life and life in general, metaphorically speaking, not only with his stupid apartment that was just
tacky,
tacky and frivolous, like all of this horrible stuff that would make you really queasy to be in an apartment like that. It's just plastic, decorations and neon and black furniture. Even his home was tacky.
Right.
Like, even the home where he lived in this beautiful suburb and had this beautiful home.
Oh, right. The house was tacky.
Even the house where he lived with his wife was also tacky. And you saw that his son also had, like, this really tacky room that was just stuffed with
crap.
With crap.
Yeah.
With stuff. And then there's even a scene where he's sitting down with the family.
It's Passover.
Even the emptiness of Passover when they all like eat the celery.
Right, the emptiness of the ritual that's going along with many millennial,
this
old
tradition that's been going on for millennia, right?
Yeah, or more, yeah.
Right, so it's just and then when he starts to recite the plagues, at Passover,
right,
and he makes a crack about the firstborn,
right,
which is a clue. I don't know if he's the firstborn of the family. We never really established that.
Right.
But he makes a crack about the firstborn dying.
Right.
That we get a clue. The directors give us a little clue into his fate.
And maybe also his past, because I have a feeling that he is the scapegoat, right?
Right.
And and that's what we're seeing all the time.
All the time.
That he is the scapegoat.
Right. So the whole interaction with his family is just appalling. Like nobody respects him, nobody likes him. At his daughter's recital or at her play, the thing that you see on the stage is also a metaphor for like what's happening in the movie.
Right.
Like, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Like this thing that comes out of her mouth.
She has gold coins coming out of her mouth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he's like, whoa, that's cool. Like, he even responds to that.
Yeah.
Which was a stage trick.
Right. So he responds to the most obvious surface level things.
Right.
Again, I think that comes back to getting, the equivalent or the metaphor of like getting the corporate gig.
Right.
He's going for the thing that looks the best.
Right.
But isn't. Right? Because in that play, you have it looks sort of like a Snow White kind of scenario, right? Where she's among the
what was the play?
I don't know, but she was among these like little like woodsmen, that could be dwarfs or whatever, and they are like, let's bestow her a gift. Let's give her the gift of every time she opens her mouth to speak, gold coins come out.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's really not a gift. That is really a curse.
That's a curse, right, exactly. He's surrounded, he's at the play watching his daughter. He's surrounded by family and friends. And yet these goons that are constantly after him, who are just on him all the time. They're tailing him when he's walking around downtown.
So he can't even be, and
so he has no privacy from them.
Right.
Like, they are everywhere. And he can't even go watch his daughter in her stupid play without turning around and seeing them, like, we're on you.
Right.
And then what happens is the scapegoat ends up being humiliated and literally undressed. So a lot of times in this triad, in these family triads, the scapegoat will become emotionally undressed. They will be attacked and dressed down. There's that's a term. When you dress someone down, or you've been dressed down, you've been attacked, you've been humiliated.
Right.
Well, I mean, he was literally, they took off all of his clothes and they ripped off his underwear and threw him in the trunk of a car.
His own car.
Right.
So now he's trapped in his own property.
Right.
But he's stripped naked.
Right. So there has to be some kind of metaphor in there about being in that infant state where you have nothing to protect you and you're naked, and the people that have done this to you are supposed to be the people that care about you, but they're just there to strip you down to nothing.
Right, and that happens a lot in a lot of family dynamics. I think the other thing though is being forced and closed into the trunk of his own car is that, you know, again, his life is weighing him down. He is literally trapped in his own life, his materialistic life.
That is true, because he did even say, as he was being sort of kidnapped out of the school where his daughter was performing, they kidnapped him, and he's like, "You're gonna take my own Mercedes?"
Yeah, he's gonna take. He says that they demanded his keys from him, and he's like, "What? You're gonna take my Mercedes too?" The fact that he mentioned the brand name, you know, like I mentioned this book a lot, but like the book Class by Paul Fussell, he talks about how the Mercedes is like a really big thing with like the middle class, right, and that it's not all that the, you know, cracked up to be, right? It's a brand that the middle class respond to, and it's interesting that was the brand. It wasn't a BMW,
right? It
wasn't something else. It was a Mercedes,
right? One thing that we never establish throughout the whole movie, as he has, you know, this family member and this family member's goons always after him and tailing him, is we never establish why. I guess he owed them money.
Yeah.
But it's like, he keeps paying him money, but it's never enough.
Right.
Like,
so
he can never pay off his debt.
That scene was a real pivot. Okay, so in the car, Arno, I think is the character's name, right? The family member. He says, "You're taking my money and you're placing bets with it all over town. So you're gambling with the money that I have lent to you." And it's basically, and this comes down to the end of the movie too, it's about a respect.
Right.
Like, you are not respecting the money that I've given you.
Right.
You're not respecting me, which it's like, okay, when it really comes down to it, you don't have any business telling me what to do with the money that you just gave me.
Exactly.
So why are you doing that? Why is it your business what I do with the money that you just lent to me? And it gets to a point to where it's like he took the money that was lent to him and he did some other deals with it, and he placed an amazing bet to where he, like, you know, tripled the money, and he would have had the money to give back to Arno, as well as make, you know, a profit for himself. But Arno, because he has no vision, he stops the bet from happening. They went to the bookie and said, don't place that bet. So they screw him. They screw themselves. And they screw themselves by not believing in the talent. And again, it comes back to not having a vision for the person who is a visionary, who has the depth of character to transcend and be greater than anybody else in the room. So that is a metaphor for people who, you know, will constantly hold you down, even if they, you know, invest in you, and then they tell you, "Oh, well, you can't do that with the money I gave you. You can't triple it or make it worth 10 times more than what I think." Right. Well, that's like family members, you know, giving you gifts of, you know, things that, you know, are of interest. Like, they think of it as like, oh, this is a hobby, so you can have this thing that I'm giving you for your hobby. But don't you dare try to make a living with that. Right, or don't you dare try to be something greater. Even if you don't make a living, it's like, that's not even like the point. Don't you dare reach your full potential. Right. So I think with Arno, there was this weird jealousy. And Arno is the part of our lives that is constantly setting us up to fail. Arno is the part of our lives that every time we reach for something good, it's sabotaged. And, you know, and we're deceived, and we put our faith in the wrong people and our faith in the wrong parts of ourselves. So that character with his two goons that just wanted to constantly pound and hurt Howard is that part of ourselves where we're constantly self-sabotaging, constantly hurting ourselves.
and putting ourselves in these positions where our lives are threatened.
Right. And you'll notice, though, that, when Howard does transcend, right? At the very end of this, when he transcends, that part of himself is also killed.
Julia is handed the money that Kevin paid Howard for the stone. Mm-hmm. Kevin does the right thing and finally says, okay, here's the money. I want that stone. He turns around and gives the money to Julia, and she turns it into $1 million. How she does it kind of doesn't matter. It just so happens that she makes a bet on Kevin. Right?
Yeah.
At a casino.
A bet on the basketball game that Kevin is playing in, that he, is the star.
Right. So metaphorically, what happens in that scene is really important. Arno and the two goons are locked away. Mm-hmm. They are literally locked away. Howard gets them into a room where they are trapped and they can't get out.
Right.
And that is really key. You have to lock away the thing that sabotages you.
Right.
You have to lock it away, even if it's related to you.
Well, and I think, especially if
it's related to you.
I think this is also that transcendence that we make when we're doing, like, say, something creative or something that brings us fulfillment. It doesn't matter if it's a creative act or if it's meditation or if it's cooking or whatever that is. Whatever that thing that makes you better.
Right.
When you're doing that, you're supposed to be doing that. It feels different, right? Mm-hmm. Life feels different when you're doing that thing, right? And that locking away was that when you switch into that mode, that way of thinking, that, some call it, when it's a creative act, it's like the right side of the brain.
Right.
You shift into that, right? Or when you're meditating, it's when you finally get to that place where you're starting to see things more clearly, okay? And so you lock away that other stuff. You don't pay attention to it. You are in the moment. I guess meditation is a great metaphor, because it's like, the whole point of, like, Zen meditation is like, it is about meditation. It is about, being here now and just paying attention to what's in front of you right there. And that's what brings you that transcendence. Okay, so these guys, these distractions are locked away. They're in a glass box.
Like, so they're literally locked away.
Yeah. They can see what's going on. And I think that what's really important about that glass box is that the thing that is always that self-sabotage, Arno, the self-sabotage, finally sees the brilliance of Howard and what he can potentially be.
Right.
But it's only after he sees that brilliance that it gets killed, right? It gets thrown away. So that shift in thinking, that shift that is required to transcend, is killed.
Using the windows as a metaphor throughout the movie was necessary for the transcendence of the potential. We often hear that eyes are the window to the soul, and it reflects back to the world what is going on inside. Going through a window in movies often transitions from one scene to the next. Windows are represented as spiritual awakenings and a progression of the self. When Howard was dangled out of the window, it wasn't time for him to transcend yet, so he was pulled back in. He used that same window to transfer his potential to his muse. In movies, framing is important to drive the scene, and the window frames allow us to focus on what is important. When the potential was met and the polished gem was no longer an uncut gem, just about every part of ourselves, from our self-sabotage to our doubt, to our childlike innocence, to our adversarial nature, turned to the potential to cheer it on. The polished gem was the phoenix rising, and all aspects that had undermined that success focused all their attention on that transformation. Our wild nature, if not kept in check, can get out of control and destroy us and destroy potential before it even has a chance to be born. Self-sabotage and making mistakes is part of the chiseling process to reach that polished point in our life, but anger, revenge, lack of understanding of the self, and bonding to the trauma can snuff the potential before it's time. The darkest part of ourselves is the part that has lost sight of who we fell in love with in the first place. It's the part that has stopped feeling, even stopped self-sabotaging, and we stopped looking up to ourselves. We stopped respecting ourselves, and we stopped believing in ourselves. And this is the part that never cared about transcending. This is the darkest aspect of us. If not kept in check, it will feed on itself and all other aspects of potential and transcendence will decay and get lost in shallow distraction. Keeping the childlike innocence and silly nature will nurture that uncut gem, allowing it to creatively explore and seek out the secrets that are hidden in plain sight. Howard's youngest son already sees his father as that polished gem, keeping that innocent nature that is in love with our talent, and the thing that makes us who we are will allow it to grow into fruition. The destruction of our old self is necessary to reach that transcendence. All of the things that have held us back, threatened us, the things that represented our old life are destroyed. The old life is gone. Uncut gems represented in this scene, where the goons are stealing the product, symbolizes that end. The destruction of the mundane, no matter how frightening that is necessary in order to transcend. They smash the cases which represent those ideals that were bred within us to keep ourselves trapped in the mundane. Up to this point, our potential has never been allowed out. The smashing of these cases symbolizes the freedom of that potential. The release of the uncut gems and the smashing of the glass is the destruction and removal of ourself that has never been allowed to emerge. We must destroy our old self to give it an opportunity to transcend. On the surface, the movie might say that Howard deserved to die because he brokered a deal which ultimately leads to the Ethiopian miners being exploited. And that, I could easily see like a liberal walking out of this movie saying, well, he deserved to die because that stone, like a blood diamond or a bloodstone or whatever, on the backs of people who die or get shredded. Like the opening scene of the movie is one of the miners like getting shredded, like his leg is shredded. Right. But honestly, for us, like when we saw the movie the first time, we were blown away. And I still stand by my position that I think that this movie is a metaphor for transcendence. But transcending into your potential.
Absolutely.
And that the movie itself was released to the population, released to the general population right before COVID.
Right before COVID. But let me go back to the Ethiopians. The guy with the shredded leg was a distraction.
Yep.
Fully a distraction, just like, the sort of idea that's like, oh, well, this is making money on the backs, and this is even brought up in the movie. This is money that's being made on the backs of poor people, right? Poor people who are more poor than you are. And
right.
And it's, and they have a conversation about that. And, Howard justifies it in some way. But I think that's a distraction from what's taking place here. Everybody is going to exploit something, whether it's, a gemstone or it's, something is going to get exploited. And it's generally, we're exploiting ourselves.
Right.
And the guy with the leg was a distraction that allowed these guys to go and find something beautiful.
Exactly.
So the ugly allowed the distraction to become the beautiful.
Just like the falling down Chinese people right. at the beginning of the so-called pandemic were a distraction
right.
from, the gamification of our lives.
Right.
Which is what this movie really is about. It's about gaming the system to your benefit. And if you game it and you can transcend and cut away the self-sabotage and embrace your muse, your muse, which Julia represented that. She was young and
right.
beautiful, which muses often are represented that way
right.
in movies. Self-sabotage is often represented as like, an ugly demon that's stupid. And
right.
that is exactly what Arno represented. He was not very attractive. He always had that kind of dumb look on his face.
Right. Plus,
his goons were a little out of control.
His goons were way out of control. They even held Howard outside of a window,
right?
threatening to drop him, right?
Right.
And even at that point, Arno was like, "Oh my God,
this has gone too far.
This is going too far.
Yeah, this has gone too far." And when he threw, Howard in the trunk of Howard's car, when Howard was naked, they have a look between each other, and Arno is like, I don't know why this is happening. Like, you could see the look on his face, like, what is going on? So Arno is, he does represent that part of ourselves that's constantly self-sabotaging. And it was necessary in order to transcend into the full realization of his potential, which was represented through KG or Kevin, the basketball player.
And the money.
And the money. In order to do that, he had to die and Arno had to die. And I don't think a lot of people will really walk away from that movie seeing this.
No, I don't either. I think that the wealth that was created is seen strictly as money.
Right.
Whereas what's really going on is the money represents that something that's in us that is richer, that makes us richer, in that transcendence.